Yeah, there's a couple guys from Creed on it.
What's his name? Mark Tremonti on guitar.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Listography. Jason, Joe, and Krams are here. We're getting into our third round of personal picks this week. This time we're starting off with Kramser. He has previously graced us with selections of Sonic Youth and Lenny Kravitz. This week he's chosen the Eurythmics for us. 9 albums. We are counting 1984 soundtrack album that they did. It's kind of like a Flash Gordon situation where it's a lot of instrumentals, but there's a few pop songs mixed in, and all of the music is by them. So there's not like other like random tracks by other artists on there. So we're counting it. You want to give any insight into why you selected the Eurythmics for this listography?
Sure, really just kind of 90% random, 6% they have a smaller discography. Wanted to get some 80s stuff in there. We haven't really done, other than Depeche Mode, like a pure like 80s synthy kind of deal. And we did that almost a year ago, so I thought maybe it was time to get in. And it's just like Lenny was one that I've always been interested in and wanted to get into. So this isn't a case of like I'm a big Eurythmics fan, I've been dying to do it. I only know 2 albums going into this, and really just from last year, researching for albums of the year was when I came across them. I do have more experience knowing and liking Annie Lennox's solo stuff. When I was in high school, I kind of dug it because she was on the Lord of the Rings soundtrack and stuff like that. So I was aware of it. Always loved the 80s growing up. It's my favorite pop decade. Always loved their hits. So I thought, what the hell? We try to get some variety on here, and we've had Queen and Steely Dan and Elliott Smith, and Eurythmics is nothing like any of that. So thought it'd be a good call.
How about you, Joe? Any experience with the Eurythmics before this week?
No, other than, listening to these albums, I think I heard 4, maybe 5 of these songs before in my life and 0 more. Just not that I disliked, I liked all the hits. I like Dave Stewart's work on Don't Come Around Here No More. Love it. By Tom Petty, Heartbreakers. I like Walking on Broken Glass a lot by Annie Lennox. But Eurythmics just never a band even in 1985 when I was looking for anything to fill out that year, didn't even bother the Eurythmics. I don't know why. Just sort of a band that exists, but I never had any interest in exploring further. So
I kind of feel like they get lost in the shuffle. I mean, a lot of people can talk about them. Obviously, Sweet Dreams and their big hits are big hits for a reason. And people like to give a lot of credit to them artistically, individually, but like you never hear about like the albums or like that one album that is monumental. So they're definitely, I feel like they don't have a lot of notoriety as an albums band. So yeah, this was eye-opening.
Feel like there might be a reason for that, although they have sold 75 million albums worldwide, which is a lot, so they must be popular somewhere.
Yeah, so for me going into this, I knew the hits, and when I say the hits, I mean the hits that were hits in the US, because they had like 4 or 5 singles per album, it seemed like, and most of them did a lot better elsewhere in Europe and in the UK. And like it seemed like maybe 1 song from each album would be big in the US. So those are the tracks that I knew. There was like Joe said, maybe a half dozen at most that I was really familiar with. So pretty all new for me as well. So we're all kind of going in mostly blind, but with some idea of what we're getting into.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a cool dynamic for the show that we don't come across very often. Probably the last time we were this in the fog was King Crimson. To be honest. Yeah, I gave every single one of these at least 2 spins, and some I just kind of liked and had on the background for the last several days. So I'll kick it off, I guess, if you guys are ready to go. 9 albums. My number 9 is going to be Peace from 1999. It was done 10 years after the release of We Two Are One in 1989. After Stewart and Lennox kind of did their little solo runs, and then they got back together for this. And to me, it was not worth the reunion. I don't remember the last time I've gone this low with a star rating, but I'm going 1.5 for Peace. I thought it was very bad. I did not like it. It's got that big world consciousness theme here that kind of beats you over the head with its activism. And 10 years later, didn't really recover from the mistakes I think they had on the 1989 release. Still overly heart-wrenching, sappy, and this time with just like a big cloud of adult contemporary themes everywhere. Lacks a lot of spirit and power. The synth, the dance, the pop, the artiness, all of it's gone here. Don't like the production of it. Don't like the sound of it, especially on the song Power to the Meek. Really don't like that song at all. And it just doesn't have anything that you want from the Eurythmics to me. And unfortunately, naturally, Lennox's voice is 10 years after their first run. Her voice is on a bit of a decline, still really good, but even the songs just neuter her down so much, or spade her down so much. That seems weird, but I don't want to be too harsh. 1.5. It's my number 9.
I have to remember all the things you said about that one, because I think they're all true, but it's not my number 9. I got 1984, For the Love of Big Brother. I found this record annoying and pointless, and it doesn't even have a good song like Flash. So it's worse than the Flash Gordon soundtrack from Queen, which I think I gave like 2.5 stars to. So I got to go 2 for this one. Other than the title track, which is decent, like it didn't annoy me. Like everything else on here, Double Plus Good was really annoying. One of the more annoying songs I think I've listened to in a while. And Sex Crime was a pretty bad single. It's just not interesting. Like there's no menace. Like if it's about 1984, I want like dark, moody, like menacing something going on. Just sounded weak and just not an interesting album in any way. Even the director of the movie didn't like it. He wanted his own score for it. And so nobody really likes this one. And I wish we hadn't done it. So 2 stars.
All right. Well, we all have different number 9s. The bottom for me is Be Yourself Tonight from 1985, which this record, you guys like this record? This record is not very good.
Joe's best physical comedy. You don't know the 1980s, dude, after like giving the adult contemporary Phil Collins stuff like the thumbs up. Come on, man. This is out of control. All right, have at it. Say your piece.
So they go far more commercial than they had on their previous records, which is kind of what I wanted them to do, because the songs on the earlier records that I like are the poppiest songs. But I think you got to be careful what you wish for, because they take it way too far on this. There's nothing here that's that memorable. Nothing as good as any of their early hits. And they seem like they've just had the life sucked out of them. There's no personality on this record. All the songs are really predictable. You got sisters doing it for themselves with Aretha Franklin, which I think Aretha sounds great on it, but the song is just stupid, not very good. The best song on it, for sure, by a lot, is Adrian, the track with Elvis Costello. But even that song has this really cheesy, like slap bass on it, which kind of just ruins the song a little bit. I still think that's by far the standout on the record, but I don't think much else on here is very good. I got it at 2 stars. And I'm surprised that you guys like this record. And I don't think there's any reason for you guys to be acting the way you are, because it's not a good record.
Joe, your Frozen slide off, that was a top 5 Joe moment for me. Visually expressed how I felt listening into that. Okay, number 8 for me, I've got We Two Are One, the last one of their initial run from 1989. I think this one is better than Peace, but it kind of precursors the mistakes on Peace that I don't like. So I'm just giving it 2 stars. Possibly their softest, most adult contemporary up to that date. And again, I've talked about it a lot of times when we've covered 80s albums, 80s artists. I love the cheese, but sometimes I don't. and can't really put my finger on it. It's just kind of getting some charcuterie and seeing what you like. And I don't like the cheese on this at all. I think it's kind of tacky. It's got that like Robert Palmer ZZ Top kind of guitar tone throughout. The title track opener has these a lot of parts of this discography has really weird, corny sound effect choices and sounds, and just really unusual. It's not a great start for me. You get King and Queen of America, which I thought was really bad, really ill-fitting, bad, fake horn sounding synth on it. I did really like Baby's Gonna Cry. I thought that chorus was really cool. Angel is like way too glowingly clean. It takes the style of her voice and just, it's not suited for these kind of songs. I think Revival was decent, with kind of the Thomas Dolby kind of sensations. And I think this one is probably the weakest lyrical album. Overly simple a lot without the emotional kind of oomph behind it, especially on that track when she's like, "You hurt me, I hate you." It's just a little much. Sylvia is probably my favorite on the album. It's unlike anything else on the album. It really sticks out. A little bit stronger at the end. It picks up some steam, and then the last song, unfortunately, is a longer one. It's like 6 minutes, really slow and sluggish. When the day goes down, it just takes forever to wrap a big bow around this one. So 2 stars, number 8, We Two Are One. And now I am just anticipating that to be Jason's 1 or 2, probably. So,
well, Krams and I in agreement on this one. 2 stars for We Two Are One. And yeah, it's missing that cheese factor. It's missing those like big 80s sounds. So when you take all of that away, it's basically just kind of like mid-tempo, adult contemporary. The lyrics aren't that interesting. Lennox doesn't sound that into it. None of those kind of big fireworks with her voice or anything like that. I kind of like the horns on King and Queen of America. It reminds me a little bit of like Squeeze. But it's pleasant, sort of adequate pop, and that's just not enough for me. Like, I don't want to listen to this. It's missing like anything that kind of made the earlier stuff cool. So yeah, very, very adult contemporary. It's 2 stars, just inconsequential, didn't need to be made. I think they had both moved on at this point. So even talking about it for that long is probably more than it deserves.
oh God, what are you about to say now?
Fear not. My number 8 is We Two Are One. And you guys said pretty much all there is to say about it. I think the record before this, Savage, they kind of turned back towards kind of like their earlier sound. It's a little more experimental, a little more dancey, kind of cool. And I would have liked to have seen them continue down that path and maybe come up with some better songs. But instead, they turn back to the really poppy, really commercial, and the songs get worse. There's nothing interesting on this record at all. It has no personality, just completely standard fare, predictable, nothing memorable. The one good thing I will say about this record is the way it's mixed. I think it puts Annie Lennox's voice way up front, and she sounds great on it, I think. But unfortunately, the material doesn't give her much room or like a moment to shine, really, because it's all so boring. Yeah, that's it. Nothing stands out on this one. I have no songs to highlight. It's 2 stars.
Fair. Okay, at least you're back some sort of sane track. My number 7 is going to be the debut, In the Garden. And man, after the first 2 songs on here, which I really liked, I was like, picking the Eurythmics may have been the best decision I've ever made. And that thought dissipated quite quickly. It starts off hot, like I said, with English Summer and Belinda, and unexpected because I don't know anything about this album going in. It's got like more rockin', kind of like Blondie or like Modern Lovers kind of vibes to it. Nothing like Sweet Dreams or, Here Comes the Rain Again. Is pretty cool. But then after that, the songs just simply aren't that good, sadly. And they kind of get a little bit too experimental with percussions and the rhythms. I think they're a much stronger band when they're kind of just going more pop and dance and just letting that be the foundation, letting that be the momentum of their songs and kind of crafting around that. Here, everything is like really kind of clunky, overly complex at times. and it just needs to be a little bit more straightforward with its musicality and its tunefulness. Take Me to Your Heart is cool and weird and oddly unsettling. The keys kind of sound, here's for you video gamers out there, the keys sound like the old soundtrack to the Nightmare on Elm Street video game from the original Nintendo, and it used to creep me out when I was like 5 years old, and this song kind of brought that back. Your Time Will Come is okay. All the Young People Today is not bad. Yeah, the songs just they're just not that great of songs, but their ideas, their creativity, and their flavor are unique enough to kind of get them off the ground as a debut. I don't think I will reach for it again, so I'm just going with 2.5 for this. So it's decent, but not essential.
Okie dokie. We're not even to 3-star territory, unfortunately. Some of these albums just did nothing for me. One of those is Savage, which I have at 2.5 stars. Moving away from the pop rock, the big production 80ness of Be Yourself Tonight, getting a little more experimental. Doesn't work for me at all. Really, really hate Beethoven. I love to listen to the faux accents, the talking, the overproduction, the lack of melody, Lennox trying way too hard. And then I've got a Lover Back in Japan, which just the synth parts don't do anything for me. And I don't know, it just doesn't work. The synth sounds all over this album are weak. The bass is kind of taken back down. And Jason probably loves this because there's less of that kind of 80s synth slap bass on it. But there's just like no momentum. There's no fire. And it's just, I don't know, a lot of pointless grooving, but without any like the hooks of the first couple albums. And the Be Yourself Tonight, really the only song on here I liked is Shame. And it's because it sounds like an 80s synth song, synth pop, big song. But other than that, there's nothing here. Nothing here I really liked. It was a big step down from one of my more favored Eurythmics albums, Be Yourself Tonight. So yeah, not a good move for them. 2.5 stars.
Okay, my number 7 is the 1984 soundtrack. Like Joe said, it was made for the Michael Radford film. Apparently the studio kind of went around him and got the Eurythmics to do it. They didn't know that Michael Radford didn't want them in the movie. So there is a director's cut of the film that they are cut out of, and he's his own score for. I think Sex Crime's a decent dance song. I think it's fine. It's a decent single. I think you're being a little hard on it, Joe, but I also think, a film score is kind of an obvious thing for them to do with, Dave Stewart's kind of synth experimentation and noodling. I think it works, or should work at least, for a film. But as a record, I don't know if it works that well. I mean, it might work for the film, like while you're watching it, the soundtrack might, accompany the film decently. But as a straight listen through without the film, I don't think it's that great. But I do think it's better than Flash Gordon for sure, without a doubt. Sex Crime, For the Love of Big Brother, and Julia, I think are all decent songs. You are correct, though. Double Plus Good is really annoying and really cloying and terrible. All the instrumental stuff is just fine. It works, but it's nothing that's too exciting or that I'm like excited to go back and listen to over and over again. A lot of it's very rhythmic, a lot of drums kind of pounding away, which I guess after a little while can, be a little much. I have it 2.5 stars, which is a whole star higher than I had Flash Gordon. I think it's okay, but outside of Sex Crime, probably nothing I'd ever revisit.
It's definitely better than Flash Gordon because you can't even come up with an example of it doing that same thing over and over and over again that Flash Gordon does. So it's automatically higher. But I'm still kind of seeing eye to eye with Joe. I've got Savage next at my number 6, so just 1 spot difference. I also have it at 2.5. Yeah, you're big left turn here after the albums before this, away from the pop, back to like the early experimental stuff. Yeah, Annie's maybe trying to be David Byrne pretty hard here at times. Beethoven, you're getting those, big synths and highly theatrical characters with the she's doing and big sample heavy sounds here. Yeah, just really far away from the more accessible pop rock stuff, like embracing the overabundance of sounds and littering everything with pomp. And that's what I like for the most part. But yeah, here you get some interesting stuff in the middle. I think with you have Place of Chill in My Heart, Shame, title tracks, okay. But the beginning and the end of this record are just not very good at all. I've Got a Lover Back in Japan does nothing for me, and it has some weird sounds on it. Do You Want to Break Up is kind of like this really failed attempt to kind of be Madonna, I feel like. I think I Need a Man, Annie Lennox sounds great. She kills it, but it's not a great song. I mean, she may be trying hard on this one too, but it's needed. She saves it a good bit. And then out of nowhere, you get a really different Eurythmics thing with the just like straight up acoustic song, I Need You, which is like nowhere else really on their catalog until you get to Peace. So yeah, there's some interesting stuff in the middle of the album, but overall, it's just not too great. 2.5 stars. Number 6, Savage.
All right, I'll go to Peace with my number, whatever we're at, 5,
6.
6. That doesn't matter. All right, Peace. Everything Krams said about it is true. It is kind of cliched. It's very adult contemporary. It's kind of boring. And yet after some of these other records, I just kind of was fine with that. It's not embarrassing, I don't think. I think it's a pretty typical like final album, especially for the 90s, like late 90s. It sounds very late 90s, sort of just boring adult contemporary. It's pleasant background music for the most part. And I think it would sound good on like made for TV movie soundtracks. I think it's like a perfect like Lifetime movie, sort of like uplifting, whatever, hospital scene. Doesn't matter, Christmas. But I thought it was okay. I thought the songs were well put together for the most part. I'm only going 2.5 stars, so it's still lower than almost anything else I listened to that year, but I don't think it's like horribly misguided. Especially, I just don't like, as you can tell, maybe I don't love the Eurythmics discography. So this one's just kind of like existing here in the 2.5 range. I have no feelings on it at all. It's just here. I didn't dislike it, so it's ahead of some of the other ones.
I am with Joe entirely on that. I have almost no thoughts on this record at all, but it's not bad. It's a mature record, very mellow, adult contemporary, nice, pleasant. These are all adjectives you could use to describe it, but it's probably only going to interest the most hardcore of Eurythmics fans. There's nothing that's that interesting on it. It's pretty bland. It does have the problem of the late 90s, early 2000s production that I don't like. The bass is way too fat on some of the tracks. The snare's too tight, kind of glitchy in places with some of the programmed drums. But I think even the worst Eurythmics album still can't be too terrible because I think Annie Lennox has such a great voice. So at the very least, you can, put it on in the background, have her voice there. It's not terrible. 2.5 stars for a completely fine, completely ignorable, forgettable record.
It's a good album to have on if you're like writing a letter to someone or organizing your laundry. Just nothing. Yeah, very good. Nice job, boys. All right, my number 5, still at 2.5 stars here, but there's some great songs on this one. I've got Touch. Here Comes the Rain Again is exceptional. It's awesome. They're doing exactly what I want with faster, heavier, dancier foundations where they thrive. I don't know why they just don't always double down on that. They do at times. Their percussion, when it's just slow and deconstructed and too intricate, doesn't do it for me. So you start off great with that big hit, and then Regrets is regrettably a mood killer for me. I think it's not a great song. I think it's terrible choice to put it right after Here Comes the Rain Again. I don't like it. I think it's bad. I don't like the rhythm on here. Everyone's playing like they are a robot. It's like so stiff and awkward, mechanical. Right by Your Side is really lively and cool with good lyrics. Cool Blue is okay. I like the drums. I like that section where it's like, how could you fall for a boy like that? Cool section. Cool little guitar part. I do like when the guitar in these really, the like middle of the 80s albums, they They have some good guitar work on it for sure. Could not stand No Fear, No Hate, No Pain, especially with like the no fear, no pain, no hate. Wow, like that was just terrible decision. Closer's okay. There's some enjoyable moments here, but the songs themselves as wholes aren't that great, except for a few that I mentioned. So the album's really just a big kaleidoscope of some cool moments, parts, and ideas, but it just doesn't stack up. They aren't going. They're kind of stuck in between on this one. They're not going super art rock like they do on the first couple. They're not going too big with the hooks and the pop, other than Here Comes the Rain Again. So it's kind of like an album where they're in limbo. It's not entirely flushed out. 2.5 stars. Touch.
Okay, we're just grinding through these 2.5 starsers, and that's where I'm still at, stuck here forever. I got Revenge, the follow-up to Be Yourself Tonight. I forgot about it when I was talking about Savage, because it's basically, you know, 1/2 dozen, 6, whatever. I don't know the saying, whatever the saying goes. After what they had done on Be Yourself Tonight, big up tempo, just like pop, synth pop, you know, that big 80s synth pop sound, lots of guest stars, lots of high energy, tons of hooks. Then they go this, and I don't get it. They bring back Clem Burke from Blondie to play drums, which you would never know unless I told you, because I mean, the songs are very straightforward. Missionary Man, Really Hate, one of my least favorite tracks in their whole catalog. So it starts off the album just on a bad note. Thorn in My Side, okay. Let's Go, fine. So, you know, it's a sprightly little vamp, but there's just nothing, there's no substance to it. Take Your Pain Away has like this weird kind of 80s John Deacon groove to it. None of these songs ever amount to anything. And Annie Lennox kind of dials it back a little bit too much on this. Like her vocals, like for songs just kind of boring and kind of mid-tempo, like you need something to rise above. And even her vocals aren't doing it for me. And it has kind of the problem where it's missing that like big booming slap synth bass and those big synth keys that really elevated Be Yourself Tonight. And it's just kind of like forgettable, straightforward 80s pop. So just, yeah, it didn't work for me at all. 2.5 stars. Yeah, nothing on here I would recommend, and nothing on here will ever be played on the radio. So I think most people have forgotten this album exists, like I did.
My number 5 is Touch with Kram on that. I'm still at 2.5 stars as well. Opens with one of their best songs. Here Comes the Rain Again is such a good song. Strong melody, very cool production. The synths on it sound great, but they also bring in all these strings, which kind of contrast with the synths, and everything kind of comes to life with the strings. I think it's great. Her vocal performance on that song is great. The rest of the album fails to deliver on the promise of the opening track, though. And I think Kram's exactly right that it's kind of like caught in this limbo where they still think they're like an art rock thing, and they don't realize they're a pop band, but they're actually making pop songs and forgetting to put hooks into them. So it's just like, I don't know, none of these songs have a good hook. Even the lead single on the record, Who's That Girl? I couldn't tell you right now. I listened to it like an hour ago and I could not tell you what that song sounds like. There's so many moments on this record, the hooks just aren't good. Also, I think the key sounds on this record, the synths, sound way more dated. They have a very like particular sound to them, more so than even the record before it on Sweet Dreams. I think those have aged much better than the sounds on this record. I think Kram's completely right about No Fear, No Hate, No Pain. I think Aqua, the song before it, has the same sort of problem. They're both just too long and really boring, and they're both about the same tempo. It's a huge chunk of the record that's just insanely boring. But I mean, really, this is probably a 2-star record, but Here Comes the Rain Again gets it a 0.5 star, just like by itself. So 2.5 for Touch.
All right, number 4, and we're going to inject a little positivity in here. We're at 3 stars now, albums that I like. And this is one that I like. I like scores the most. I'm going 3 stars for 1984 for The Love of Big Brother. And I kind of feel this way about it that Joe does with Peace, where I'm just like, it's fine. It's good. It's nothing exceptional. I can listen to it because I just love synth experimentation and parts, and that's what most of this is. But I do think Julia and Sex Crime are pretty darn good. I have not seen the film, but I think the score does a good job of conjuring up images and feelings. Like, I think it's a little moody. You get a little bit of paranoia. You get kind of that creepy sci-fi luring kind of vibe to it. So obviously it's not an album that is gonna like a record collector needs to have, but for a straight, easy, accessible listen, I thought it was cool. I got no problems for it. And you get that Dave Stewart electric sitar kind of thing that he does on Don't Come Around Here on the title track, which is really nice. So I just think it's just a cool listen for musicality and sound. Nothing more, nothing less. 3 stars. There we go.
Okay, I too moving to 3 stars, which means I tolerate it. I wouldn't say I like these albums, but there was some interesting stuff on this one. I got Touch, 3 stars. Here Comes the Rain Again. Great song. Always really liked it. Unfortunately, yes, that is kind of by far the big standout on this one. I can tell you what Who's That Girl sounds like, because I wrote down that it sounded like Visitors era ABBA a little bit. So I'm guessing it has like some icy like synths to it, maybe like a little more restrained on the vocals. No idea what it sounds like, but I'm just guessing from what I wrote. Right by Your Side, you got that reggae-ness. There's so much like synth bass on this, and it's so 80s sounding. Like it does not stand up very well, but I still kind of like it because I like that over the top. It's like boom, 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 like all over the place. The synth sound, yes, it's super 80s, super kind of outdated, but I kind of like that. I'll take that over like boring kind of mid-tempo adult contemporariness any day of the week. Cool Blue has a good groove, but I find a lot of these songs probably could be half their length. Like they're trying to make like these 12-inch like dance singles or something on this, and the songs just never quite get there. Like it gets into like a decent groove, but that's it. Like that's the end of what they could accomplish with these songs. Same with something like Paint a Rumor. It's 7.5 minutes long. It has a cool robotic beat, this kind of choppy, cool synth line. I think Lennox's delivery on it's really good, but there's just no reason it should be 7.5 minutes long. There's just too much noodling, kind of pointless jamming. The songs are just a little bloated, but I mean, it wasn't terrible. There's some decent stuff on here, but I just think as like a whole cohesive album, it doesn't quite work for me. And it's a step down, in my opinion, from the first two. So they're kind of going in the wrong direction, which hurts it a little more.
Be interesting to see what people think of Touch, because it was in the original Rolling Stone top 500 of all time. So I think it might be a fan favorite among Eurythmics fans, but yeah, it didn't do a lot for me, or doesn't sound like any of us. My number 4 is going to be Savage, which after some like very mainstream sounding 80s pop records, they kind of go back to their earlier art pop, synth pop sound a little bit on this record. I agree with you guys. I think you both said Beethoven. The opening track is not very good. It's very weak way to open the record. But unlike you guys, I really like I've Got a Lover Back in Japan. I think it finds a good middle ground between the art pop and their mainstream pop potential. I think it kind of rides the line. It kind of does both pretty well. There's some really cool acoustic guitar touches on that track that I like, and I think the melody is pretty strong. But then track 3, Do You Want to Break Up? I find the vocals on that to be really annoying. Then the next song, You Have Placed a Chill in My Heart, I think is pretty good. So it's like a kind of a back and forth, really mixed bag record. But I do think the production on almost every track is pretty cool. I think there's some of the coolest, most unique production throughout their entire catalog on this record. I don't think enough of the songs live up to how cool the production is. I don't think the songwriting is that great, especially on the back half of the record. It really kind of falls apart. Like Kram said, there's some good stuff in the middle and a few good songs near the front, like I said, but after 2/3 of the record, you might as well just turn it off because there's really nothing else after that, even though the production is still pretty cool and there's some interesting sounds. A couple good songs that I like a good amount, plus pretty good production, and it's kind of interesting where it lands chronologically. So for that reason, I've got it up at 3 stars, which means I think it's a decent record.
I've got Sweet Dreams Are Made of This, their sophomore effort, and I'm going 3 stars. I think it's just missing a little bit something to get up to 3.5 to be a very good record. I think it's a good record. And even though I have it at 3 stars along with the soundtrack album, I do like this one a pretty good bit more. Starts off great with Love is a Stranger. She's a great singer. She sounds great on this. I've Got an Angel is really cool. It's got kind of Peter Gabriel, deep, bassy keys on it. I think some of the sound effects are a bit cartoony, over the top at times, but I still like it. I like The Walk. Gives me a bit of early Depeche Mode vibes. Sweet Dreams is great. Jennifer is really cool. Like a big, epic love song that feels like you're lost in like the vast canyons of like a computer grid or something. Her cadence and Somebody Told Me is really great. Yeah, I think they're kind of finding themselves on this album. Pretty strong effort that I think they will grow on. You get some cool Talking Heads vibes with the bass and the quirkiness with This Is the House. Only one I really don't care for is the Isaac Hayes written Wrap It Up. But yeah, I think it's a good synth pop record. Easily has enough good songs on it to reach for again. So that's where I'm at. Number 3, 3 stars. Sweet Dreams Are Made of This.
Number 3, Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. 3 stars. Totally in sync with Krams are on this. Love is a Stranger, good start. Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. Classic, icy synths. The Walk. I agree. It sounds like Kate Bush mixed with Depeche Mode. It's what I read for that one. Like the big horns and the dynamic vocals. Other than that, everything else is good, but I don't think there's another like big standout. I don't mind the Sam and Dave, Isaac Hayes penned Wrap It Up cover, but everything else is pretty decent for like this genre. Like it's tough for me because this is not like my favorite genre. This sort of like icy, not the big synth pop, but sort of like the low key Euro, whatever. I don't even know what you'd call this. New wave, I guess, maybe a little bit, maybe a little synth pop, a little new wave. And it's just fine. Like it's 3 stars, but I don't know, there's just something missing with all of these albums for me. Other than the hits, I just don't gravitate really towards any of the other songs. So I don't know, 3 stars. Annie Lennox sounds good. The production's good. I think Dave Stewart's, talented, but there's some element that I haven't put my finger on that's just missing from a lot of these albums.
My number 3 is also Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. So that is definitively their 3rd best record. Love is a Stranger, really cool pop tune with great melody, great vocal performance. The synth sounds on it are really cool, but I think the mix on it is kind of weak. The music is way, way pushed back. Annie Lennox way up front, and it just doesn't have enough power or oomph behind it. I wish it was just like mixed a little bit bigger, a little fuller sounding, with some of the backing tracks brought up a little bit more. I mean, the snare on that track is so quiet. Obviously, you got the title track, which is great, a classic. I Could Give You a Mirror, I think, is a solid pop song with a good groove, good melody, and like Kram pointed out, Jennifer is really cool. It's not as poppy as some of the other tracks, but it's got like this really haunting atmosphere. You got this throbbing synth going on. You got the sound of the ocean in the background. It's really cool. But I don't know, after just those 3 tracks, the rest of the record doesn't do as much for me. A lot of it feels like mostly Dave Stewart kind of messing around in the studio, playing with synth sounds, and like, are the songs really that good? I don't know. I don't think so. It's fine. But even as far as experimental music goes, it's not really that exciting or interesting. It's not like he's blowing any minds with what he's doing with the synths. I don't know. It's just okay. Most of the rest of it. It does have those 3 really great songs though, so I think it's decent. 3 stars.
Runner up, number 2. I'm up to 3.5 stars here. I think this is a very good album, especially for what it is. And it's Revenge. I think it is a really cheerful, big, classic 80s pop album. And they're aware of it, and they do it really well. Like me and Jason talked about, when they're not in limbo, when they have like when they know what they want to do, it can be pretty good, even song to song on some of the lesser quality albums. I do have a problem with some of the mix here, especially with the drums. Very thin. Seems like it's really condensed, or like just doing like a foggy, like jet plane flyby. They're playing with punch, drumming with punch, but it just comes off really weak. Similar to what you were saying about Sweet Dreams. And the other problem I have with this, that it might, without these problems, it might be a 4-star album for me. Missionary Man and Thorn in My Side. I'm with Joe. I do not like Missionary Man at all. Leads off, and then Thorn in My Side, I don't care. So tracks 1 and 2, not a good start. But after that, I'm pretty happy. There's a lot of really good kind of cheesy, faked synth sounds on this album. A lot of perky sax. There's a lot of keys and a lot of sampling and stuff like that. But it's not relying on the synth, especially to drive the songs. It's really just there as atmosphere, as accents, not the focal point. And I think the songs are good. They're catchy, they're tuneful, they're probably a little more simple than a lot of the other albums. A little bit less new wave Demeter, more just like accessible, kind of commercialized, big sounding pop. But because in their soul, they're kind of artsy, weird, and creative, they can't avoid that. So when they do these straight up pop records with their flavor, it comes off pretty interesting. I think When Tomorrow Comes is pretty good. It's got some great guitar work on it. The Last Time is great. Miracle of Love is like cheesy, but in a good way. And it's just kind of like a big anthemic ballad that I think works. Let's Go is full of pep. Take Your Pain Away, I'm not crazy about, or In This Town. So it ends a little bit weaker, but I just think it's a really good, fun, upbeat 80s pop record. So that's where I've got it. 3.5 stars, Revenge.
Well, I didn't agree with a single word of that, other than the hatred for Missionary Man, but hey, it's the Eurythmics, who cares? My number 2, I'm going back to the debut. I'm surprised Kramser had this so low. I think the debut is pretty cool and pretty interesting, and I wish they had gone in that direction, really, instead of kind of neutering their sound a little bit and going kind of in the synth pop way. This is definitely more new wavy, some real strong like post-punk on here. I think it starts off great. Like Kramser said, English Summer is really cool. I had no idea this record existed or that they had ever even like dabbled in this kind of sound. So the first listen through, I did not like it. I thought it was like, oh, this isn't, big horns and Annie Lennox doing her big vampy thing. But I listened to it again a couple times and it definitely grew on me. I like the kind of trancey vocals that Lennox is doing on this, especially on English Summer. Got some of the ambient noises, like they're experimenting stuff. Klemberg drums. I think the drums on this are pretty cool, actually. I like the drumming on this more than that kind of synthesized 80s drum machine stuff. They bring in Holger Suke, I don't know how to say it, from Cannes for some French horn. And it's just more interesting. Blenda is probably the most surprising thing in their entire catalog. It sounds like alternative rock from the 90s. Like I was really surprised to hear it. Like it's like this big alt rock song right in the middle of this like weird new wave post-punk album from Eurythmics I didn't know existed. So that was kind of a cool find. And the rest of it, I think it's more interesting than their other albums. I'm not going to say these songs maybe not as good as some of their later stuff as far as like actual pop songwriting. But I was constantly like intrigued by what they were doing. And so yeah, I'm up to 3.5 stars. I think it's their coolest album and something I kind of wish they had gone more towards instead of, like I said, the synth pop stuff. I think they're just kind of a decent synth pop band, but I think they could have been cool with this direction, but they didn't go this way. So we can only think of what ifs on this, but I think it's 3.5 stars. I think it's cool.
I'm going to agree with you on all of that, especially the part where you said, I'm surprised Kramser didn't have it higher. I'm also surprised by myself there. Yeah, I mean, I found it interesting and intriguing more than pretty much any other record, but just didn't think the songs kind of lived up to their style on it.
That means Be Yourself Tonight is Joe's number one, and it was my bottom. So we're continuing the tradition of being completely opposite on 80s synthy pop music, because the same thing happened when we did Depeche Mode.
That was 17 albums, I think, to make that happen with.
Oh yeah, Kate Bush too.
Yeah, we are on a roll as far as being not eye to eye. Eye to foot. In Jason, eye to foot again on 80s albums.
My number two is the same as Kramser's. I have Revenge, which it takes, I think, the commercial sound of Be Yourself Tonight even further, but it introduces Clem Burke on drums, brings him back. He played with them in the past, but I think it gives the record more of a rock band sound, which I think works. Plus, they're getting rid of all the kind of really corny slap bass faux funk stuff that they were doing, which I did not like very much on Be Yourself Tonight. Everything here is more, centered around grooves and pop songwriting, more so than dabbling in funk and disco and whatever else they were trying to do on Be Yourself Tonight. I think it works pretty well. I think it's a much better version of this type of mainstream pop record. I am with you on Missionary Man. I don't think that's a very good song. I do like Thorn in My Side, though. The Last Time, I think it's a great pop song. Take Your Pain Away and A Little Bit of You both have great bass lines provided by John McKenzie, the latter of which I think is a really good song, has a really catchy chorus. Annie Lennox sounds really good across the whole album. I think the vocal production on this record is great. The one big strikeout that I'll give this record is the harmonica on it. There's 4 tracks on this record with harmonica, and the tone of it is just terrible. It sounds fake, but someone is credited as actually playing harmonica on it, but it sounds like a bad 80s synth harmonica or something. It's just not good. That's the only thing really that I don't like about the record at all. It sounds super cheesy. The album closes with a great vocal from Annie on I Remember You. Overall, I think it's a decent pop record. Maybe a little too glossy, a little overproduced, but I think the quality of the songs shine through enough to get it that decent rating of 3 stars.
All right. My winner and Joe's. This is the first one me and Joe have seen relatively eye to eye on in a while. That just proves how awesome we are. Number 1 is going to be Yourself Tonight. That's where it belongs. Number 1, main reason, best batch of songs. My least favorite song on here easily is still pretty good. Most of the albums leading up to this have a few songs where I really have no interest in, but this one doesn't really have that. My least favorite is probably Sisters Are Doing It for Themselves. I kind of like it. I think it's fun. It's got a killer solo. I think the lyrics are just pretty lame at times, even though I like what the song's about. But yeah, you get a little bit more traditional kind of rock flair right off the bat with Would I Lie to You? There Must Be an Angel is really good. I Love You Like a Ball and Chain is cool. I like that synth tone a lot. It just has a lot more liveliness to it on this album. The touches of guitar are great. It's just got a big, more accessible, straightforward, streamlined sound, which I think works. Like I said before, just getting that pop kind of foundation and letting their personality just kind of gloss over it instead of the other way around is the best way to do it. And you get just more, everything's got more rhythm and is more humanistic than sort of like the clunky or weird percussion stuff they do. Conditional Soul is a pretty cool song. It's a little slower, ballad-esque. Really dig the acoustic kind of slide part on it, or it almost sounds like it could be an electric violin. I didn't look into it, but whatever it is, sounds really cool. Adrian is great. I like kind of the backdrop about like the romance in the Cold War age. It's All Right, Baby's Coming Back is cool. Really cool hook on that. Here Comes a Sinking Feeling is great. Very close to 4 stars. I think it could probably use 1 or 2 more downright classic bangers. Like you throw Here Comes the Rain on this album, and it's almost like a must-have piece of rock history. So no 4-star albums from me from Eurythmics, but a couple of 3.5s, which are really good albums. I'll just come out and say it. I don't think they have a great album. I probably like them more than their scores would add up, just because I think she's a great singer and I think their hits are really good. I think my top 10 songs are solid, and I think when their sound and vibe are on, they're pretty cool. But yeah, that's my number one, Be Yourself Tonight. Joe, talk more about it.
I can't believe I had the highest score. I'm 4 stars easily for Be Yourself Tonight. It's just a really good, full synth pop album. It's everything that they had done previously kind of turned up a notch. They bring in a boatload of guest stars. It's just like a big pop party on this one. And yet it also has maybe the only instances of guitar on the whole thing that I remember, courtesy of Mike Campbell from the Heartbreakers. And I like Sisters Are Doing It for Themselves. I think it's fine. I think Aretha sounds good, but that's not the only highlights on this one. I think Adrian with Elvis Costello is great. I think him and Lennox's vocals mix just perfectly. And I love There Must Be an Angel, Playing With My Heart. Bring in Stevie Wonder for a harmonica solo. That's how you play a harmonica. None of that revenge crap. And I think Annie sounds great on it. There's still like a little bit of experimentation with the synths. The drum machines on There Must Be an Angel is cool. There's some glitchy, distorted instruments. I Love You Like a Ball and Chain has kind of like a cool, slightly robotic, like Cars beat, a little bit of new wave still in there. Really, Conditioned Soul is the only one I didn't like. It's kind of like noodly, faux, Eastern, whatever. Everybody's got to have one dud. It's not a 5-star album. It's a 4-star album. But It's All Right, Baby's Coming Back, I think is another banger. And I think anything that lets Annie Lennox just kind of go loose, just belt, wail out. You got a slightly funky groove and a little bit of R&B. Must be taking some lessons from Aretha on this one. And I think the mix of big synth pop, R&B, some of that live instrumentation from the Heartbreakers, just easily their best album, not even close. So yeah, 4 stars. This is really the only one I'd listen to again. I might go back to The Garden, but this is the only one I think I really enjoy. Like, I enjoy these songs. I think it's pretty, for 80s synth pop, I think this is at the level, above most bands' capabilities. So not like my favorite, but it's good. It's a good album. Definitely recommended. And most of my top songs are coming from this one. So yeah, 4 stars for 1985's Yourself Tonight. Could move into my top 10 in 1985, really, too, now that I think about it.
All right. My number 1 is In the Garden, their debut record. Got Clem Burke on this one also. A couple of the guys from Can.
You almost said Creed. You got
almost
Creed.
said Kram. I almost said Kram. This record does have more of a rock band feel than any of their other records. Like Joe said, a little bit of post-punk, but far more pop leaning than almost any other like post-punk band. English Summer is very cool, moody opener. Belinda, which is really upbeat, it's got hand claps and kind of a dancey rhythm pounded out on the toms. Annie does some ad-libbing near the end of the song that sounds really great. Take Me to Your Heart and She's Invisible Now are really cool art pop songs. The second half does run out of steam a little bit, starts to get a little repetitious, and I don't think the songs are quite as good or memorable. But the final track has a really cool groove and a catchy bass line. I like the live drums on the album. I think that kind of makes it stand out more for me. I like that sound more than the program drums that they do later through a lot of their records. And the keys on this record and the synths are used more as they would be like in the context of a rock band. It feels like a band. And that's just more my style than the rest of their catalog. I like it. Even for being number 1, it's far from a perfect record. I agree with Kram that it does kind of peter out at the end. So I can't get up over 3 stars. 3 stars for my number 1 for the Eurythmics, In the Garden.
So Jason enjoyed this the least. Me and Joe were pretty much on the same page with liking a good chunk of it, not loving it.
I have to say I was disappointed overall with their output, especially just because of my familiarity with the singles. I was expecting a little bit more from the album cuts. Even like, all these albums have like 4 singles released in Europe. They all charted pretty decently. So like I was going in, I think, okay, they have a bunch of hits. Like maybe they just don't play them on American radio. And you listen to them and it's like, well, okay, I get it now. I get why they kind of petered out after Beat Yourself Tonight in the States.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I was kind of expecting to find some sort of like hidden element of Eurythmics back catalog. Really just think the problem that doesn't elevate them into what I would consider one of my more favorite bands is they're just not as consistent as I was kind of hoping they would be. They just kind of like they gain steam with the quality, then they kind of fall apart. Then they do things like We Two Are One, and it's like, why would you do that?
I will say when I initially listened to the full discography, I was even more down on them than I am now. When I went back and was taking notes and kind of just like skipping through them and listening to like individual tracks, the songs stood out more in that context, but trying to put together like a full record and sit through an entire album of them was not as enjoyable. So I wouldn't even say it's so much that they're a singles band, but they're just not an album band. I think their songs work like, individually more than they do like strung together. They're definitely a small doses type of thing for me.
Agree 100%. They're not an albums band, but if you put together 20 to 25 songs, you could have a pretty nice afternoon listening to that. Yeah. Although I will say I'm not going to go around listening to them again on my own, but I do think each time I listened to them, they gained a little bit of favor towards me. It was the first go around was tough.
I gotta say, it's probably my least favorite discography we've done so far. I'm looking at my like album ratings throughout like a whole thing. Other than Sonic Youth obviously isn't my thing, but at least that was kind of interesting. This one, just these albums just made no impact at all, other than Be Yourself Tonight and In the Garden. Everything else is pretty much like at the bottom of all of these lists for each of these years. So sorry, Eurythmics. You just didn't quite do it for me. I'm disappointed.
Have you ever not gotten to 4 stars, Joe? Like, have you ever topped out at 3.5? What was your number one Lenny?
My number one Lenny was 4. I think every band that we've done, they're bigger bands, they're bigger names. Most of them are classic artists. I think for the most part, they all have like one like pretty darn good album. Even Sonic Youth, I got to 4 stars. Depeche Mode, a couple 4 stars. So even though, as a whole, I probably have Sonic Youth and Depeche Mode ranked lower, just like the lack of interesting finds in this one, like with those bands, like I found stuff, I was like, okay, this is cool. I didn't know this existed. With Eurythmics, like there just wasn't anything beyond like the surface for them. So every band we've done has at least one album with 4 stars so far.
I do think it's an important distinction to make that this probably seemed like a very negative video, but it's not that I dislike them. I just have so little feeling about them at all. They're just there. All right. So if you're a Eurythmics fan and you made it this far through all of our shoulder shrugging, let us know what you think of them, how you rank the records, what you think of our lists. Drop all that down in the comments. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you've not subscribed yet. Hit the bell for notifications and find links to all of our social media down in the description. You'll also find a link to our website there, so you can check that out as well. And check back tomorrow. We'll be giving you our top 10 Eurythmics songs each. Thanks for watching. We'll see you then.